Hey there, Alex here. For those of you new to Behind the Podium, I just want to give you a heads up that we do use adult language. You'll definitely want to grab a pair of headphones if there are kids around or you're at work. Now, on to the show.
Welcome to Behind the Podium, Unveiling the Coach. Problem solvers have problems too. So here at Behind the Podium, I, Jared Cohen, and my co-host Alexander Ellis discuss the struggles, philosophies, demands, and practices of the coach, or said more broadly, health and wellness practitioner. To provide quality coaching is to enhance someone's life in an everlasting and unfolding way. This is not easy and requires a lot of due diligence and self-mastery on the part of the coach to be able to perform. So without further ado, join us as we dig deeper into the depths of the coach's mind. Welcome back, or welcome to Behind the Podium, Unveiling the Coach. I am Jared Cohen with my partner in crime,
Alexandra Ellis.
And today we go behind the podium with a coach, Kundalini yogi, CrossFitter, television editor, cold immersionist, breathing enthusiast, and world traveler. Specifically, this guest of ours is a level 4 Pranayama Two-Stage Breath instructor and a Wim Hof Method instructor. Without further ado, it is mine and Alex's pleasure to welcome Miss Breia White to Behind the Podium.
Hey, thanks guys. Yay! Good to be here.
Thank you for joining us. It is awesome to have you on your first podcast.
Yes, it is. This is my very first one, so yeah, I'm super excited. Super excited.
Well, I am definitely excited to have you here because you, as Jared has mentioned, are what I think is an expert when it comes to breathing, which many of us think like, oh, well, you just breathe. I mean, what is there to it? And yet from my work with you and getting to experience the work that you do, I have uncovered that there are so many different ways that we can breathe depending on what we're trying to achieve.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I'd say, let's see, in regards to the question, no, you're absolutely right. People do, it's funny, I was in Staples the other day, and I was talking to like one of the guys, like one of the worker guys there, and he was like, "Oh, you teach breathing?" Yeah, it's like, well, what is there to know? Like, you just you do it from birth, and I'm like, no, you're absolutely right. But there's some things that you can do in order to get in order to help deal with your emotional self. You know, that's one of the biggest things when you're talking about the Pranayama Two-Stage Breath. That is a breath that really does help you work through some emotional trauma, some emotional stuff that's going on with yourself. Trying to think in regards to.
Well, let's back up for a second. What kind of breathing, if any, did you do this morning?
You know what? I actually did the Wim Hof breath this morning. Because, it's when people ask me, what's the difference between like the Pranayama Two-Stage Breath and the Wim Hof breath? I use the Wim breath in order to help get me focused.
Okay.
I use the Wim Hof breath when I'm trying to tap in deep to my physiology. So, I'm about to go do a workout or, oh man, like a month or so ago, I got food poisoning. After a Super Bowl party. It was rough.
Stay away from the nacho cheese.
Exactly. It was rough. But, I had gone to bed, right? I was feeling totally fine. And I woke up like around 2 a.m. And you know how like when you're like, oh crap.
Mm-hmm. Like death is coming over my body right now.
I'm going to spend the night next to the toilet. I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to hoff this thing like until I feel better. And I did the Wim Hof breathing for about 2 hours, probably the longest that I've ever done it.
Oh my God.
It was one of the most intense like breathing experience I've had by far. I mean, I was hot, I was cold. It was nuts. But by about an hour 30, I started to feel all of the symptoms start to go away. So all the nausea, all of like the headaches, the cold sweats, my temperature completely regulated. Wow. And like after that, after about an hour 30, I was like, okay, I'm feeling a little bit better. I'm going to keep breathing though. I'm going to breathe for another 30 minutes or so just to make sure that this is kind of quelled down. And after about another 30 minutes, I was able to get back into my bed, go to sleep, and wake up, and I was completely fine the next morning.
Wow. That's awesome.
I know. So it's like, you're talking about being able to really tap into your physiology in that way just by doing the breathing. Like it was awesome. And it's like you as an instructor, you go over the studies and stuff, and you talk to Wim about when he did that experiment with the E. coli. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, that's, and it's like, I don't know, once you have that, like your own experience with it, it's not that it's unbelievable because it's in the science, right? It's like, it's there, proven. But like when you have it for yourself, it's like, oof, man, this is some epic stuff.
Seriously.
So what made you decide on that 2 hour mark? Like, how did you, it sounded like you had this sense of like, okay, if I'm going to overcome this, I'm going to need some Wim Hof breathing. But you already had this idea of like kind of the time duration that was needed.
I didn't. I literally just put on, I was just like, I want to see how long it takes. If I can change it, I want to see how long it takes. So I literally just put on a timer, and that is how long for me. That's how long it took for me to be able to work through the symptoms. So
and you did subsequent rounds, just kind of like
back to back, baby.
Wow,
back to back. I was just like, no stopping. Like it was just like, I did do the breath holds at the bottom, but they were very short because I couldn't. I couldn't hold like for 3 minutes or whatever. It was like maybe like 20, 30 seconds, if that. But I just kept the power breathing going, and was able to work my way out of that to a restful night of sleep. So
so awesome.
Yeah.
And out of curiosity, I mean, because I have some ideas of what might be happening physiologically, like what do you think, what happens when you do these controlled breathing practices in the body?
So, well, for the Wim, when you're doing this power breathing, you're turning on a lot of adrenaline. You're putting a lot of adrenaline in the system. And so let's see if I can explain this. You're doing that, and you're able to essentially, and because of that stress, a lot of those, sorry, as I'm totally.
Like the inflammatory response?
Thank you. Yes, like the inflammatory response ends up decreasing because you're not producing as many inflammatory proteins. So like the cytokines, those are not being what's the word? Sorry, guys.
Produced, yeah.
Yeah, they're not as many of them are being produced.
Right.
So those that innate immune response of when you do get sick, like the nausea and the cold sweats and all that stuff ends up decreasing because of it.
Right. So combating it.
Right.
And also would you say any type of controlled breathing is going to turn up the more parasympathetic response of, like rest, digest, repair?
So what's cool about the Wim Hof breathing is, when you're doing those 30 breaths, right? Those big 30 power breaths, you're basically eliciting the sympathetic response. And when you're in those breath holds, you're eliciting the parasympathetic response. So you're able to switch in and out of those systems at will, which is pretty impressive. It's pretty cool to be able to have the ability to do that. So
that totally makes sense, because I like from the beginning that you've already kind of alluded to this fact that Wim for you is much more of a breathing to bring intention, to bring focus, to bring clarity for a particular task, maybe versus some kind of down regulatory meditative breathing in and of itself. And I'll just share that's been my experience. And I've been working with this high school club volleyball team, and first introduced just breathing in general in terms of a down regulatory effect, but realized that wasn't what was going to be most useful in terms of a pre-performance type of routine.
Absolutely.
And so then I started having them do just 30 seconds of the power breathing, followed by the 30-second hold just before they play. And that's had a really cool effect in giving them something very tangible, very quick, obviously only a minute, and really zeroing in that kind of focus from a breathing practice.
Right. Well, and that's what Casper Vandermolen, who's the head of the Wim Hof Academy. It's like the master, one of the master instructors. He and Wim are working with MMA fighters that are and they are implementing like this breathing method so that they can use before they go into a fight. Cool. So, cool. I mean, it definitely gets you hype. It definitely gets you ready, without all the jitters. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, it's very effective in that way. And I mean, I even, like I said, before a CrossFit workout, I'll, do 3 or 4 rounds, of breathing, of this breathing, of the Wim Hof method, just to get me ready to take on the work. So it's super helpful in those regards. It's like, and then, but it's like you do the Wim Hof method long enough. Like, I mean, you can definitely get into that psychedelic state, that, very meditative Zen like state. I just don't necessarily use it for that, but I know plenty of other instructors and other people who do, So, and, like I tell people, in regards to being able to, what I find so cool about the method is that ability to be able to turn that sympathetic response off and get into that parasympathetic state. And, it's so needed now, just with modern life. We're all super consumed we're always getting stimulus from all different places, right? So a lot of the times we don't get out of that sympathetic response, and it's important to do that. So I mean, it's our nature, right? To be able to get into that rest and digest mode. So. And I think, the body ends up getting in all types of havoc if you're not able to do that. So this is a tool that you can use, right, in order to do that.
Yeah, and just to have a tool for people to feel like they have some control, because we have given up control to devices and teachers and all of these other things. And like you're saying, that could wreak havoc in the body. And to be able to have, a specific set of things that you can do to change your mental state, your physiological state in the moment is so comforting and empowering when it feels like you're out of control,
Right. Well, and that's what Wim talks about. He's like, this method is, you use it to empower yourself. It's like you don't have to rely on other people to do your healing for you. It's like, no, you can do your own healing. Just take the step, He's like, his thing's like, breathe, motherfucker. It's like, yeah, that's exactly what you do. That's exactly what you do. That's how you take control. So yeah.
It pairs really well with being able to increase one's what's the word? Well, I guess to decrease one's breathlessness and improve that breath holding capacity, the actual utilization of oxygen, that I think people haven't really had the tools for, in just generally thinking about like, oh man, how can I improve being able to hold my breath for longer or go longer without oxygen? It struck me recently how much that is also a fixed characteristic people associate with, so they'll be like, if you said, okay, I need you to hold your breath for a minute, they'd be like, oh no, I'm so bad at that. Like it's another kind of really fixed quality. And so as I was saying, I've been doing this, work with these volleyball girls, and it's been cool to see them get excited about, because I only have them hold for 30 seconds, but obviously some of them, have to get air sooner, and it's been cool over time to see when the 30 seconds are up, their reactions in like, oh, that was easier, or like, like, oh my God, I feel so much more confident now. Like I totally held that. That was 30 seconds. Like, and so that, like, this was just on Sunday, I was doing this work with them, and that like really struck me in a way that I wasn't necessarily planning or thinking about, was just this additional confidence piece of like, oh my God, like I did this power breathing, and then I held after the exhalation, and I held for longer than I thought I could, and now I have a new benchmark in just feeling powerful and capable.
Right. See, that's that empowerment piece. You're doing more than you thought possible, right? So, and that's another thing that I love about the practice, is just like, I didn't think that I could climb Mount Snežka in nothing but my sports bra and shorts.
It's amazing.
But I did.
Wow.
So it's like, you are capable than more than you think. And this practice allows you to hone that, mentality, so that you can, what you practice on the mat, you take out into the world. So it's like, you can get into an ice bath for, 30 seconds to a minute, and get yourself under control.
Right.
That's probably going to be, in a typical day, like the most difficult thing that you'll do throughout the rest of your day, or throughout the rest of the week. Right. So if you can get yourself together in that way, you can, have a business meeting, and like a difficult business meeting is not as difficult, because you are training, you're training your body and your mind to be able to handle that kind of discomfort, right? So, but man, the breath holds. I mean, it's an awesome party trick. Like, and it's the sexy. It's
right.
The sexy.
It is the sexy.
Like, it's what gets people, especially like athletes and things.
Yeah.
Like, if I hadn't had prior breath experience, like that would have been the thing, and I've been like, oh my God, I was able to hold my breath for 2 minutes. What? And it's like, and not having any prior, like, major breath training. So that's the sexy, but like, but being able to, again, I think the appeal is like that's a really great hook. And then, once you get into it, you really start to see like the stuff behind it when you're talking about like being able to get into that rest state, being able to deal with difficult situations. It's like, that's the stuff that is, the core, but people, that's not the sexy. So,
right.
But it's like whatever gets you in the door is like, whatever it is. It's like, that's fine. Totally fine. Yeah.
And I think there's been, especially I've seen in the movement space, a lot of talk about resilience and, trauma-informed stuff and stress reduction because of just where we are as a culture. And so I think the important thing to consider is like, whatever gets you in the door, this is just one piece of all of the puzzle. This, you need to have as many different options as possible because your experiences are completely dynamic and always changing and always different.
Right.
And so the more tools you have in your toolbox to be able to pull out, and drop down that card for whatever the experience is, the more suited and comfortable and capable of anything that you'll be.
100%. 100%. I mean, Wim talks about how, this practice is just another tool that you can use to have more days of feeling healthy, happy, and whole. Right. Alex, you're absolutely right. Like, in regards to the Wim method, it's like, I like to use it. Like, I want to be able to use it so that, people can definitely get introduced to the breath and get to the deeper side of things, but also be able to take some of these other breathing techniques that I've learned, especially the ones that help with, like being able to have big emotional releases. Being able to be like, okay, you did the Wim breath. It's awesome. Like, these are all of the benefits from that particular breathing. And it's like, and then here's this other thing that you can add to your toolbox that could help with, like I said, with your emotional capacity, being able to deal with things like that. So yeah, being able to just have all these different tools so that you can, in whatever situation you're in, you can be like, you know what, I'm going to use that for this right now. I'm going to, this other thing that I learned, like I'm going to use, this is the perfect thing for that right now. Yeah. Just giving people the variety, giving people the variety, and know that, there are thousands of methods out there. There's thousands of techniques. I mean, it'll take me an entire lifetime to even to explore all this stuff. But the things that I have now, like, they've been absolutely life-changing. So, and I know that being able to introduce things like this into communities that may not necessarily, go to yoga, or that they will be into these types of techniques and be better for it,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And as we're talking to you, I'm realizing the stories I've told myself about, oh, you can't do that, you can't do this. So when I was in college and studying exercise biology, we had one quarter where we took a class all about research. And so we did, body fat testing and VO2 max testing and, cardiac rhythms, all that stuff. But one of the things we did do was to look at dead volume and how, the volume and capacity of the lungs as a benchmark to look to compare it in other experiments. And when I was doing the test, I'm like exhaling as hard as I can and inhaling, holding my breath, going under the water. They're looking at like what you displace and all this stuff.
That sounds like torture.
I know. Just 2 hours. Let's have some.
Yeah, waterboarding.
I know. It was a really cool test, but what stuck with me is even when I had to repeat it a couple times because they were like, this is so weird. You have the lung capacity of a child. And I was like, oh, okay. And that's kind of been something that I've just, put on my back and carried along for all the stuff that I do. Jill Miller in Yoga Tune-Up was the first one to introduce me to Uddiyana Bandha, which the yogis, it's, the diaphragm vacuum stretch that you do on an exhale. And through that, negative pressure, you're able to create this eccentric stretch of the diaphragm. And I just remember being terrified to be holding my breath and in that place, like, oh, I don't have any air here. And after, you and I worked together and we did some of that breathing, I still remember the pranayama breathing. Okay, we're going to do this for 20 minutes. I'm like, girl, you're crazy. But just like you're saying, after like this whole idea of, not being able to hold my breath to having child-sized lungs and all this stuff, I've finally been able to just to shed because, everything is changeable and everything is possible. Right.
Well, it's interesting you say that because one of my like a long time ago, my Pakwa instructor is Chinese martial art. I did a long time ago. He was just like, his name's Master Adrian. He's like, Breia, he's like, you're born naked. And as you get older, you put on these clothes, right? And people are putting clothes on you as well. And clothes being a metaphor for expectations, thought processes, beliefs, all of those things. And he's like, when you start to engage in these types of spiritual practices, whether it's breath, yoga, martial arts, or, things that have you look beyond just the physical, beyond just your thoughts. He's like, you are able to start to unclothe You're able to, take all those clothes off and get back to your original state, your natural, your natural state, which is love. I mean, ultimately, it's one of the things that Wim talks about as well. But it's just like, when you start doing these types of practices, you're able to take those things off that aren't necessarily serving you, and realize that they're not serving you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Be aware of what clothes you've been wearing that you didn't know you were wearing.
That you didn't even know. Yeah, exactly.
Like, this sweater is so ugly, I have to get rid of it.
Exactly. And sometimes it's tough, it's like, it's an ugly sweater, but it's been serving a purpose for whatever reason, right? Mm-hmm. So being able to, and the spiritual practices also allow you, like, to get the courage, to cultivate the courage to take that stuff off. So, cause it's a part of you, you've been walking around with it for so long. It's like, and it is serving some type of purpose. But it definitely gives you the courage to let it go. So, yeah.
So speaking of purpose and why, we've yet to get a glimpse into your background. I'm curious as to how this has evolved for you, and being where you're at now as a breath teacher and ambassador. Can you give us some of the cliff notes to that?
Sure. I found breath work actually by way of CrossFit. I started CrossFit back in 2011, and CrossFit was kind of like the catalyst. I found CrossFit back in 2011. I was at a box, a really popular box, Valley CrossFit, for the first time. I was doing CrossFit, and so I was at a box with heavy hitters, right? So Kristen Clever. I mean, this is when they were all there. So it was Kristen Clever, Lindsay Valenzuela, Becca Voigt, Katie Hogan, heavy hitters. And so I was there, and watching those girls throw down, I was just like, oh my God. I was like, man, in a year's time, like, dude, I'm going to be crushing it. Like, I'm going to be there. And what ended up happening was I ended up kind of crushing my body, because I didn't pay attention to all the stuff that they were doing after, all the stuff that they were doing before, in order to, all the nutrition stuff, all the things that you've got to do as an elite athlete in order to be at the level in which they were at. I mean, Chris was past games champion. So, I'd fallen in love with the community and the sport. And, but after about a year of really working hard and going at it, and I was like in my mid-30s at the time, early 30s, I broke down. My body was like, girl, like, you need to slow your roll. I ended up with plantar fasciitis in my feet, chronic knee pain. The last big injury I got was I partially tore my rotator cuff. And so by the end of, I think, 2012, I was like, I gave up on the sport, and ended up really leaving the community. And I was just physically broken, heartbroken, and during that time, my day job was working as a television editor, and that and doing reality TV, and it's a great gig, but it was super stressful. If you know anybody that works in the TV industry, it's not like a 9 to 5.
No.
It's not a 9 to 5.
It's a 9 to 9.
It's a 9 to 9, 7 days a week. No.
Yeah.
It can be. So I was, having to deal with those types of stresses as well. And I, at some point, I'd finished a gig. It was a really tough job. And I was like, I need a break. I was actually really depressed. And I was like, I need to not be doing the things that I've been doing. So I took a break for almost a year, and I fell, and actually my therapist suggested that I go try Kundalini yoga. as kind of like a, just a really nice restorative therapy type thing that I could do on my own. And I went to my first Kundalini yoga class and bawled my eyes out. Like, it was such a powerful, it was incredibly fast in regards to how it worked, and incredibly effective in regards to me being able to really just be with my emotions and be still for a change. And so cried that class, and then cried like the 2 or 3 classes after that. And I was like, oh my God, there's something here. And in Kundalini yoga, there's a ton of breath work in that practice. And it was the first time that I'd gotten introduced to breath work. And out of all of the things that are in that practice, I mean, we do a lot of mantra work, mudra work, where we're working with our hands, putting them in different positions, a lot of asana work, and but breath work, out of all of it, was the thing that really, I was like, it was the most visceral for me. It was the most like, something is going on. It wasn't subtle whatsoever. And so I was like, man, there's got to be other practices. There's got to be other things going on that I'm not aware of outside of Kundalini. And and a friend of mine took me to a Pranayama Two-Stage Breath class for my birthday, and she was a Kundalini yogi. And I took that class, and it just blew me the fuck away. Like, I just was like, I had such clarity in that practice, and in regards to purpose, and so much relief from stress. Like, it just, like, that class, I felt like I was floating. I was literally just like floating above my body. It was like having an out of body experience. And I was like, all of this from just 25 minutes of active breathing? Like, you got to be kidding me. So I was totally floored. And Alex, right? Like, you feel like you feel all of the, and it's one of those things where experiencing is understanding, right? So it's like you feel all of this energy in your body, and you realize, like, man, there is so much more going on with me and in me than I am aware of. Like, this is the first moment of me going, wow, there's so much more. I had that experience, and I was like, I've got to go get more of this. Like, wherever this is, I got to go find it. And I went, and the guy who is kind of like the Pranayama Two-Stage Breath guy here in LA, his name is David Elliott. And so he has a teacher training course, and I went through that. It took almost a year to finish. And I was like, I really want to start teaching this. Because it's been such a healing practice for me, and I was like, and I know people will dig it. Like, they just, the breath is undeniable. It's just like, even people are like, what is this? Like, and I've had all types. It's so visceral. Like, you cannot deny the effects. And I was like, I want to start teaching it. Actually, I went, and before I was like officially like starting to teach it, I had gone to a CrossFit level 1 certification, and I ran into Kenny Kane, and who's the owner of CrossFit LA. And he's the one that turned me on to Wim Hof. Wow. So we were having a conversation about breath and like being able to bring practices like these in Kundalini into spaces like CrossFit, because athletes, they need it. They like, one of the things at when I was at Valley, and just from my own personal experience, like, I wasn't celebrating my wins. Like, when I would do well in a workout, like, I was still like, like, such and such did better than me. It's like that kind of mindset, or like, I was, from all the stress and stuff that I was having at work, I was taking it out on the barbell, like, as part of the reason why I was broken, physically. Mm-hmm. So it's like, like, CrossFit has an amazing ability to build the physicality of an athlete, but there's really not much available for that emotional, mental relief. and for athletes being able to deal with, with work, with training, because at that time, it was like CrossFit was not a full-time job, right? It was like you were still working, you were still like having to train day and night. Like it was, there was a lot of other pressure happening. So, so anyway, back to Kenny, we had this great conversation. He was like, man, have you seen this guy Wim Hof? And I was like, no, I've never heard of him before. He's like, you should go watch this Vice documentary. So that night I watched that Vice documentary and I was like, and I'm booking my plane ticket. Like,
nice.
I was like, it was one of those things where, it was crazy. The stuff that like seemingly crazy, but I just had a deep knowing that like I was going to be there. Like, I was like, this time next year, I'm going to be there. And I'm going to be working with this guy. I'm going to be learning this method. I was like, this is the thing that is going to hook those athletes like Joe Jane CrossFitter, that, that elite athlete, like this is the thing. And so yeah, I signed, like I did the 10-week course. I had signed up for the instructor, the instructor program. Fortunate enough to be able to do it, to be able to get in, because now there's such a demand. So, went to Poland, did the program and then went to Poland actually this past November, to finish off my training. And, man, it was, it was tough, and it was physically demanding. It was emotionally demanding. We got poked and prodded in all kinds of ways, but it was for us to be better teachers. It's for us to be better teachers, and that's what we really went there to learn: so how to teach this stuff, yes, but also how to be a good teacher.
It.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's kind of the journey. And, there's only 23 of us in the States that are certified to teach the method. And I'm incredibly proud to be a part of that first class.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So super excited. But yeah, we just did. And so that's kind of the journey. So now I'm, working at CFLA right now, at CrossFit Los Angeles with Kenny, doing the Pranayama Two-Stage Breath classes, on the weekends. And, man, I'm telling you, like, I'm like, yes, it is so needed. It is just, everybody that has been in class, I think they've just been floored by the power of the breath. Just like, right now, it is the most underutilized tool that we have in our toolbox. Yep. And when people come to class and they don't really have an idea of what this can do, the majority of the time they walk away and they're like, wow, holy crap. So yeah.
That was my exact thought when I walked out.
This is holy crap. Yeah. Exactly. So yeah, that's kind of right now that's my journey. And, teaching, I'm teaching Wim Hof Method, workshops and things. And, and again, just really trying to bring it to these populations that don't necessarily know or, have any idea that this stuff is out there for their healing purposes.
Are you still television editing?
I'm not.
She's joined us on the fitness side.
Joined you on the fitness side. Yeah. It just got to a point. It was actually just kind of ridiculous. My last gig, it's been a year. Uh-huh. And my last gig, man, it was hard to walk away from too, because it was, everybody was amazing. The crew was fantastic. The hours were good. The content was, I could cut it blindfold. Like, it wasn't that hard. It was just all of these things. But like, I felt so bad for my producers, because they'd like come in my bay and they'd be tripping over mobility tools, or they'd catch me doing handstands, or I'd be in the middle of like a breathing session, incense all in my room. And I was just like, it's probably time. Like, I was like, it's time for me to just really explore this other side and make the leap. So I haven't been, it's been about a year.
All right. So we have to go kind of on that tangent a little bit, away from coaching. I'm curious if you could share with us any like behind the scenes sort of, information about TV editing and things that we as consumers don't realize, especially because you mentioned reality TV, and I feel like we're duped all the time. Like, is there anything good you can give us in terms of?
It's all scripted.
What's a lot of it is scripted now. But here's the thing: it's so funny because when people are like. People on those shows are like, oh, they depicted me as like the villain, or they depicted me as like the whatever. It's like, I mean, yeah, to some degree, in the editing room, we can do things that, excuse me, that kind of have it take that slant. But for the most part, it's you. Like, it is just you. I mean, the cameras are rolling all the time, right? So, and it's not like we're necessarily picking out things that that have that slant. It's just like that's you end up. It's interesting because people, especially like on things like Big Brother and those types, Bachelors and those types of shows. At some point, it's like, everybody's very cognizant, especially at the very beginning of the thing. Everybody's very cognizant of the cameras,
but then it goes away.
At some point, that just goes away, and it does just like the cameras are like wallpaper, basically. Wow. And then you're just you. So
you're like, yes, keep doing that.
Yeah. You're just you. So so that would be one thing that I would say.
Okay.
Let's see what else.
So you guys aren't as manipulative behind the scenes as the public might want to pin you as.
Well, and here's the thing. It also depends on the show. It depends on the producer.
Yeah.
I worked on a lot of shows that like had a lot of integrity. So,
cool.
So the producers weren't quick to be like, change that word to that word, or like switch it up in that way. But I do know people have worked on shows where, that may be the case. So,
I was going to say, if you're curious in this, there's a show on Lifetime called, I think it's like Undisclosed or something. Okay. And it's the behind the scenes look at a Bachelor style show. Oh. And they're doing all of those things you're saying, where they're manipulating, they're going in and lying to people just to get a reaction out of them. And I'm like, this is so awful. So terrible.
Listen, it can be on that side of the spectrum, just like with anything. So, but on the shows that I worked on, like there wasn't a whole lot of that. So,
you would need to shed many a layer of clothing to get home from that.
I'm telling you.
A lot of breathing to work through that.
A lot of breathing.
More so than food poisoning combating.
Exactly. And then, the other thing I'd say is that people don't realize like how long it takes to put something together. I mean, unless you have like actually sat down and edited. Like it's funny. My brother the other day, he's a chef, and he's like, hey, can you shoot something for me? And then like he's like, oh, it'd be like a little 3-5 minute thing, and put it together. And I was like, oh my God, that's like a week or two of my life right there. Just that 5 5-minute clip with like music, and it's like, you want me to shoot it too? So it's just like people don't realize like how long it takes to put things together. And I don't know if they necessarily appreciate it either, because like a 30-second, a minute, like a 30-second to a minute thing could take like half a day, entire day to do. So
well, that's the film professional in you. Because every time I talk to my dad also was in the television industry, and I'm like, okay, we should do this YouTube video, and I'm like, just turn on the camera, start talking, and then just clip the beginning and the end, and like we're done. He's like, no, we need like a script, and like what's our shooting schedule, and like what time do I have to be on set? I'm like, no, it's not.
Dad, we're just making a YouTube video. Calm down.
That's true. So anything that now that like I've put together for myself, I'm already like, okay, it's going to take this much time. Like I need this much B-roll. I need like this kind of interview. Like it's already, it's probably
B-roll.
Way more than, exactly.
Just dropped a nice little lingo on us there.
Yes. So yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. It's probably just the professional in me.
Yes.
But it's like you want it to look good. You want it to look good, and the art of editing is making it look seamless. Like there's no kind of like, oh, what was that?
Right.
So
only on my videos. All right, well, okay, back to breathing. I have a question for you, a personal question, because, after I was able to work with you and we did a session of, Wim Hof breathing, and then we did another session of the Pranayama Two-Stage Breath. Right. And so I went out into my classes and was playing around with this stuff, both in, group settings and in private settings. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I'm not equipped for, which is why I'm going down this trauma-informed resiliency path, mm-hmm. is what do you do when this does bring up emotions for people? Like, how do you hold space for them? And I just felt like I was sitting there like, right. What do I do now?
Well, I think a lot of that comes with experience, so being able to sit, being able to sit with your own stuff, right? The practice that you do on your own, being able to deal with the emotions and stuff that come up for you, and then being able to sit in that discomfort of, man, somebody's crying their eyes out, really just being able to sit and be still. And not try to fix it, especially in my classes, like, people cry all the time. And all I do is, I'll either take a blanket over, put a blanket on them, I'll put a hand on them, and just let them know that I'm there, and then step away, because it's their process. It's all about them. So I don't want to interfere with, like, I don't want to interfere with their process. Yeah. So I let them be in it. And you say encouraging words, like, just really be, with whatever is coming up, really, just really be with it, that you're in a safe, and just remind them they're in a safe, protected space, just say, allow for it to come up, because sometimes people, even if they're crying and stuff, they're still like holding on and like not wanting to be in that discomfort, and you just encourage them to just be with it, because a lot of the stuff, a lot of the time, like those emotions and things, they just want to be acknowledged. Like they just, they want to be seen. And people ask me all the time, like, well, why am I crying? Like, you have a guy in there. It's like his week has been totally cool. Like everything's been fine. He walked in class and he's like, I'm good. I'm just here to experience. And then he's bawling on the floor by the time it's all said and done. He's like, I don't understand. Why am I so sad? Like, why am I crying? And the way that I equate it is just like the breath really allows you to get into that no mind state, where where like all the thoughts and the conditioning and all that stuff, like just doesn't have any control. Like it's put to the side. So say for instance, Alex, you and Jared get in a fight, right? And
never.
Like an argument, not a fight, not a physical fisticuff, but like you guys get into an argument, and say Alex says something to Jared that hurt his feelings so much so that he wanted to cry, right? And in that moment, the mind takes a look at the surroundings and makes an assessment. Is like, what, Jared, crying right now is not a good look, dude. So why don't we just table that until later? And so, you go home, you're busy with stuff, and that later never really comes because that charge is no longer there. So, but that emotion is still the thing that happened is still somewhere, in your body tucked away. And so, but the mind is just keeping it at bay, because it's just like, we don't need to go through that discomfort. We're good. We're solid. And then you get to breath class, and the mind like goes away. And that thing that really, really needed to be expressed has an opportunity to do so. So when people are like, yeah, I don't know what this is from. It's like, it could be from something in childhood. It could be from something, that happened like 2 weeks ago, that you just didn't really deal with. So, and a lot of the times, just having that acknowledgement, having it come up and out is enough to let it go. And then, you know, it's gone. It's gone.
Yeah.
So, and people leave feeling lighter, you know, they're not as heavy when they walked in the door. So that's, you know, one of the beauties of the practice is, that you do walk away with, some understanding and less burden, you know? So.
And, so I've, explored a little bit of tension release exercises where you induce therapeutic tremors, specifically in the psoas, under the same idea of letting your body physically do what it wants to do, just like an animal will shake off any negative energy or too much energy.
Right.
And the way they describe it was like, you know, in one sitting, you might not deal with it all. It's like, you know, I shook up a can of Coke and I've been shaking this can of Coke for 29 years. I'm not going to open the whole thing at once. That'll be disastrous.
Disastrous. Yeah, absolutely.
Let a little bit out and then come back later and let a little bit more out. And, you know, I'm sure the process is different for everybody, but there are so many times, I mean, for myself, I know too, where you're like, you know what? Suck it up. It is not appropriate to express this right now. Just pack it down there, cover it up, put some tar on it. We'll get to it later. And that later for so many never comes.
Right. 100%. 100%. Well, and this is why having tools like this, is so important. You know, I'll relay a story for you guys. So in how I use like the Pranayama Two-Stage, for instance, you know, so this past weekend was Mother's Day weekend, right? And you know, I was lucky enough to have my mom with me for like 27 years of my life before she passed in 2007. So this year will be like, you know, in August it'll be 10 years since she's been gone. So I've had like plenty of Mother's Days without her, you know, and being completely fine emotionally, especially, you know, more times passes. It's just kind of like, I'm super grateful for the time that I had with her. And, but for whatever reason, this Mother's Day, I was really triggered. And you know, I had like an epic weekend, like Wim was in town and like, you know, all things were like, it was just awesome, but there was still, there was this underlying heartache that like, I could not shake. And I knew it had something to do with Mother's Day, but I was like, well, why would it really? Because I've had all this, it's like, I've had all this time, you know, I've got a therapy for it. Like, you know, there's been a lot of healing around this, right? But it was still like, So, it's like Sunday afternoon, I was like, I'm just going to sit and breathe and see, with the intention of getting behind like what the heartache is. And what came up for me was, it was so awesome. What came up for me was that, for this time in my life, I know that she would, you know, my mom was like one of my greatest champions. And she would be so into this breath stuff, and she'd even be into the ice bath. I don't know if she'd do it repeatedly, but she'd at least try it. Right. And so, and it was one of those things where I knew like, she's the type of mom that if she knew I had a class and it was my first like breath class, she would have flown all the way from Texas to California to be there in that class.
Yeah.
Just so like Alex's mom.
You know what I mean, right? So
totally.
Having that kind of support. And so at a time in my life where like there's all this big transition, where I'm doing all this cool shit, like she would just be all about it. So I was missing having her physical presence there, for this time in my life. And that's where the heartache was coming from. And so just from that realization, I was able to start healing that heartache and move into and breathe myself into a place of gratitude, that, you know, of the time that she did have, that I did have with her. But, you know, in that breath session, it's not like I walked away from that and I was like, I'm feeling so much better, you know, like I was feeling like a lot better, but it's still like the heartache's still there. And so I just kept up with my own spiritual practice. You know, the next couple of days, I really took care of myself. I did some more breathing, you know, I ate right. I talked to my dad, I talked to my brother, and, you know, talking to friends that knew her best, you know, just those types of things that could be super healing. And, you know, it didn't take just one session to lift that, you know, it took, you know, a couple of more, and then that kind of support, I was able to, like last week, totally fine. I mean, this past weekend, completely fine. Was able to move through that type of thing. But you're absolutely right, Alex. It doesn't. Sometimes, some of this stuff is just so deep. Losing my mom that is a deep wound, and I'm sure I will be healing from that my entire life. But it's like when things like that pop up, I now have something to go to, in order to help lift that and heal. So, yeah.
Totally. And I was reading an article this morning about trauma and grief and how, all of us are going to experience loss at some point in our life. And, that just getting through it and being 100% fine, exactly as you're saying, like, that's not realistic. That's not what happens.
Right.
And to have a place or a practice to go back to whenever you need it is so, so critical. And I just hope that, all of the coaches and teachers who are listening understand how important breathing as a tool is for everybody that we work with, but also for our own personal practices.
Own personal practice. Yeah. 100%. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, and I think people are getting it. To be honest with you, I think. Sorry, phone. I think people are starting to understand that. Well, here's the thing. It's like these practices have been around for like thousands of years, right?
Right.
Like and they've been around for thousands of years because they work. But I feel like it's just now coming over this way. It's like it's coming out of the mountains of the Himalayas and, and out of the caves. And like it's finally kind of like, being known out here. So, my big mission is just to bring awareness to the practice, to the practices, and that, these are tools that already that you already have walking around. You don't have to, like with the ice bath, that's a whole different thing. You got to get the tub and get the ice and, but the breath you can do at any time, anywhere, any day. So I think it's really just more of having people be aware that these things, these types of things are out there and that they work, that they work. So yeah, absolutely agree.
Another interesting context or piece for people to check out, if they're not familiar, is what's referred to as emotion-focused therapy, which was started by this guy, Leslie Greenberg. And similar to what you're talking about, the whole theory is trying to distinguish between primary emotions versus secondary emotions. And how often we will have one emotion that is usually the default, but is masking a different emotion. And so it becomes a lot of unpacking, as you're saying, and working through the hefty amounts of accumulation that have taken place because of all the times in which we have put aside certain events to essentially, quote unquote, deal with later or not deal with at all.
Right.
And then again, it becomes its own kind of overuse injury.
Interesting.
So yeah, really fascinating. And like you're saying, it's really amazing how now, as some of these tools become more mainstream or ubiquitous via the internet, people can start having some ways that they're in more control, they're more empowered to at least start dabbling with being able to take a shot at whatever this accumulation that has taken place and take care of themselves, like Alex was saying, so they can better care and be in service of others. Right.
Well, one of my teachers, Guru Singh, my Kundalini yoga teachers, he talks about, with these practices, you're releasing the pressure of your subconscious. So all of these things that, all these traumas, all of these things that cause discomfort that you tuck away somewhere in your mind or in your body. He's like, when somebody cuts you off in traffic,
Right.
And and it's just like an innocent. It wasn't like he did it on purpose. He just didn't see you or whatever. And then you rage about it, right? You're just like that. Blah, blah. It's like, completely like the response isn't in step with the offense, right? Then it's not just from him cutting you off. It's from stuff that has been that has been building.
Yeah.
Right. And that's how people get themselves into trouble. It's like, if you don't deal with it, right? If you don't have like a spiritual practice, you don't have some type of practice that you do in order to release that pressure of the subconscious, essentially taking the air out of an overinflated tire, then you get yourself into trouble. Right. So that's when you have that instance on the 405 where a guy gets cut off and he stops in the middle of the 405, gets out of his car, bangs on the window, is like that, and then goes to jail. So it's like, it's stuff like, it's why it's so important that you do have something in order to release that pressure. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, and it just makes me think back to the conversations Alex and I are familiar with within the mobility space. It's the same negative accumulation effect. Like if you're, it's overuse, right? And it came from your experience with CrossFit, and I had a similar journey as well. And this aspect of how we're trying to solve one problem by doing more of another problem. And it's this loop that we're in that is not really addressing the accumulation, but just adding more and covering up for a period of time. Right.
It's interesting because I was at Brian McKenzie's Art of Breath clinic this past weekend, and Rob Wilson, one of the guys that he's working with, said this thing that I was like, oh my God, you're so right. Hang on a sec. Yeah, he said, am I getting better at my suffering, or am I actually improving my physiology?
Yes, 100%.
And I was like, amen, brother. That's what I'm talking about.
Right. Am I getting better at surviving? Which is a lot of what my fear and frustration with a lot of CrossFit has become. It's about this ability to survive more of the task, more of the beatdown, and less about this skill acquisition and improvement and optimization of your own experience that should then relate back to something else beyond this gym space versus becoming more about, what's the next thing I can survive?
Right. No, you're absolutely right. But man, it's so hard. It's just, it's hard to get past the sexy factor. To get past that, that flash and, all the stuff that you see at the games. I find myself getting in that trap too, I mean, even still, right. It's like, I'd love to be able to thrust her 95 pounds for like 30 times. And yes, but my body's like, no, Breia, absolutely not.
No, Breia, let's not say we did.
Let's not say we did. I love it. So yeah, but that was one of the things, that was one of the big things I walked from that clinic, which by the way is fantastic. Brian McKenzie, he is, this thing that he's doing with breath, I think he is going to be able to, or his approach, I think he's going to be able to reach a lot of people that wouldn't necessarily think of breath wouldn't even have a second thought about breathing. But the fact that that's kind of their motto, their stance is just like, am I getting better at suffering, or am I actually changing my physiology?
Yeah.
And if you want to actually change your physiology, then let's talk. Let's see how we can get you there. So, and let's see how we can do it with breath. And then that back door of, let's see how your emotional and mental state change. 10 times out of 10 is for the better. Right. So yeah, that was, the other thing that I learned from Brian's workshop is, so this dude is like totally coining a term. It's called superventilation. And I was like, thank you, Brian, because, with Wim and some of these in the Pranayama Two-Stage, people equate it to hyperventilation. They're like, oh, it's hyperventilation technique. And I'm like, no, it's not a hyperventilation technique, because, hyperventilation has a context of being completely out of control. Like, you've got no control over it. There's no intention behind it. Like, you're stuck suffering. And so when people say, oh, it's a hyperventilation technique, they automatically go to that, and then they don't want to try it. Right, they're like, I'm not feeling that, right? But you say something like, you change the term and say it's superventilation, meaning that there is intent behind the breath, and that you are in 100% control of your breathing. So at any point it gets too much, you're feeling too much and you want to slow down, you have control of that. So now it's like, and superventilation, it'll be one of those terms that like next year, like that's what people will be saying for sure. By this time next year, it'll be like, superventilation technique.
You heard it here first.
Yeah.
Behind the Podium podcast.
Yes.
Behind the vernacular for breathing.
Yes.
So, but it's cool because it's like, again, like these communities that don't necessarily, like the Pranayama Two-Stage, it's not like science backed, and it's all experience based. So, people use terms like chakras and energy work and stuff in that space. And so like, I love being able to take things like this, like superventilation. No, say it like this can be your word, so people aren't scared off, be able to bring it to those communities. And also some of the physiological stuff behind the breathing and like what it is that we're doing physiologically with the breath. Being able to take it to those guys, like, again, it's awesome. It's awesome to be able to do. So,
yeah. And as we've talked about here, to me, it's not even just so much about what's more scientific or not. It's about how is somebody receiving the language and how is that shaping their experience. And as you said, hyperventilation has a negative connotation to it. So we need words that are not only going to potentially be more accurate, but also going to frame that experience and the exposure to that experience be more fitting for what we're trying to achieve as coaches and ambassadors of some kind of practice.
Right. And it allows us just to reach more people for, just the masses. Like, again, my goal is just to get this out there to as many people as possible, and whatever language it is that needs to happen in order for them to have some sort of understanding and how it applies to their life. Like that's what I'm going to be using. That's what I'm going to be doing. So, man, I had this experience where I'd gone into a corporate setting. And kind of like a Google, or like one of those places. And it was funny because the HR lady was like, she's like, we're gonna have like 10 people here, and I told them it was a mindfulness class, and I was like, that's cool. Yeah, it's total mindfulness class. And and so somebody these guys come walking in, and they're all like total tech people with their hoodies and stuff, and I was like, oh man, they're not really too sure what's about to happen. But and this chick came in and she's like eating a donut, and I was like, hey, you may want to put that down.
Yeah,
you may want to put that down because we're about to do some work.
About to get real
up in here. So it was a crazy setting because. So just imagine, right? I'm in this like open area. They have like this big meeting room that's all glass. And in the middle of, and people are still working, right? There's only like 10 employees that are doing this. And, and with the Pranayama Two-Stage Breath, there's music associated with it. And, I run them through everything. We start the breathing. And, that group got sent into outer space. Like they were just, and what was so, and I prefaced it with saying, this is going to help with creativity, because it does. It allows you to move through a bunch of crap so that you can get unstuck with whatever it is that whatever project you're trying to get to. And it also helps with mental focus. It does do that. And so again, I was shaping the message in a way where they're like, okay, like I'm on board. And, but by the end of that class, people were totally blown away. There was a guy there that had some realization about a personal relationship that he hadn't thought about in ages, and that he didn't realize that he was still needing healing from, and he was crying. I mean, it was a beautiful, beautiful thing. But like, again, being able to take this tool into a place like that, it's very, it's super powerful. But again, it starts with language. So it's just kind of like, they thought it was a mindfulness class that was going to help with creativity, is going to help with, with mental focus and, essentially helping with their bottom line. But it was so much more,
Right. So, and if you had said, that this is a psychedelic breathing class, no one would have showed up.
Oh my God, no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Maybe a couple, but like, yeah, the HR lady probably would have been like, and we're probably not going to do this.
Yeah. But I mean, that's just a perfect example too of how context is so important, and the language and the words that you use, because the underlying principles work no matter what. It's just how you package and present it to who you're working with.
Absolutely.
Speaking of packaging it, I wanted to ask earlier, do you have a certain method for what you front load, in terms of when Alex was asking about dealing with somebody having a really emotional experience? Do you preface any of that? Like, we're going to do this work. It may result in... Okay.
Absolutely. I absolutely do.
So you give some... you find that that's better.
Warning.
Yeah. Okay.
Give some warning. Oh, 100%. Because if not, then people freak out. People freak out.
Interesting.
So, like with Alex, I was telling her, it's not only the emotional stuff that happens, it's also the physical stuff that happens when you engage in these type of superventilation breathing techniques. So, sometimes you get tingling sensations in your hands and your feet, maybe throughout your entire body. Like there's something that happens in the two-stage breath. And I know it's happened with some fellow instructors of the Wim Hof Method, when the Wim Hof gets really, really intense. Like your hands, there's a lot of tension in your hands and your fingers. They turn into these things we like to call lobster claws. And you don't have any function. It's just like, seriously, it's like this for almost the entire time. So if you don't preface, like these types of things could happen, as soon as they start to happen, people will freak out. So, and the same with the emotional stuff. It's just kind of like, you tell them, this type of practice, you may run up against, your emotions. Like sometimes people cry, sometimes people cry from joy, they cry from sadness, they'll cry from, or they'll laugh hysterically. I've been in a class where somebody started giggling and then the whole class it was nuts. And then, sometimes people get angry, they yell out. So, you let them know that those things can happen, just so they're aware. So when it does happen, they're not like, what the fuck, But here's the thing. It's so funny because, if you've never done the practice before, you're always that dude that's like, or you're always that girl that's like, that's not going to happen to me. Yeah. It's like, I'm not going to really experience that. And then you're the person. So.
And what's the fine line in terms of giving enough information to help people not be surprised based on what happened versus giving too much where people are like, oh, now I'm worried about what's going to happen? Right.
That's a good question. I try not to talk a whole lot at the beginning of class. Okay. I do give, kind of some expectations, but here's the thing. Every breath practice is different. Right. I have yet to have a session where I was like, oh, that felt like last week, So, because your body and your mind are different every single day. So some of those things could happen. None of those things could happen. All of those things could happen. So that's kind of what I preface it with. Is just like, you may not experience any of these things, and that's okay too. That's totally fine.
Okay.
But it's really, and here's the other thing my teacher always tells me. He's like, your body's not going to give you more than what you are capable of handling. And so, and that's been just what I've believed, and I know just from my own personal practice. So and that's what I tell people is like, if you're ready to dive deep, if you're ready to, move past whatever this thing is that's keeping you from, X, Y, and Z, this thing that you say that you want, I was like, then your body will be like, okay, let's do this. Your mind will be like, all right, let's do this. Because again, we're working with forces outside of just of this physical, this and the thoughts. So so it won't give you more than what you need. So
yeah, it's something I always struggle with, is trying to figure out what is necessary to front load versus what to just completely leave out and get started, because I don't want people
in their mind
too much, or kind of starting to anticipate something that most likely may not happen at all.
Right.
But let's just get into it, experience it, and then can I create a safe enough space where if anything is happening that you're unsure about, just ask.
Yeah.
Versus
and that's also what I I say, at any time this is getting too much, I am here, raise your hand, let me know. And then I always remind them that they are in complete control of their practice, right? So that's
nice. The
other thing that just gives people, again, it's not like some drug that you take and you're along for the ride. This is like you are in control. So yeah, so just like if it's too much, just go back into nostril breathing, calm the system down, and then when you feel like you're together, just get right back in it. So and if that's all you can do for the day, then that's all you can do for the day.
Yeah.
So this is your practice. It's your practice.
Yeah, I like that, and it makes me think about the psychological need for autonomy, to feel comfortable with what's happening. And I actually had this thought recently in a CrossFit workout, how the gyms and the coaches need to do a better job of encouraging that autonomy, because in a workout you have so much of that social psychology that is driving your mindset, right? Where you may during the workout be like, I don't know if I should, and it's a hard game, right? Because we have the negative self-talk too, that you believe you can't do more than you actually could, but sometimes you are right? That like maybe it's not a good idea to do another 21 reps of this. And so as a coach, this very dynamic process of trying to encourage and help build the belief in that autonomy, to if you're in a situation like a workout where there's another 2 rounds left and you don't feel like this is the best thing for you right now, that you should be comfortable saying, you know what, I'm going to stop here, versus feeling like, oh, well, no, like that's what it says on the board and I have to. So. Yeah.
Well, and I think it all goes back to environment, right? It's like, it's, and the standard in which the coach is set.
Yes.
So, because it's CFLA, that is the norm.
Right.
It's like, hey, listen, if you are not feeling this, here is what else you can do.
Yeah.
In order to keep moving and be a part of the group with no judgment.
Yeah.
And I've been at other places where it's like, no, we go RX and we go hard.
Right. Yeah.
So I really think it does depend on the environment. And if you're that coach that's like, no, I want people to, at the end of the day, be able to go home and sit on the toilet, without any pain, then, you end up finding those boxes, you find those places where that is the norm,
Yeah. The environment's huge.
Yeah.
Well, we want to be respectful of your time, Breia. You are awesome and have shared such nice stories and insight, personal experience. So I got 2 rapid fire questions for you.
Okay.
Here we go. To conclude, the first is to describe your personal experience with coaches or mentors and how they have shaped your approach. Particularly, I know you've obviously spent a good amount of time with Wim, and then the other guy, I believe you said his name was David Elliott.
Yes,
right?
David Elliott. Yeah, absolutely.
You can go off on other coaches and mentors, but I am interested in what that close experience, kind of apprenticeship, has given you.
Okay. Well, with what's been amazing is that all of my mentors, all of my coaches, the thing that I've learned the most from them is the humility. Like, they are probably some of the most humble people that I've been around, especially, aside from Wim and David, Casper Vandermolen, the head of the academy, for Wim Hof, and then Kia Miller, who is my Kundalini person, my Kundalini guru. They walk around with such humility, and it's something that has attracted, that I'm totally attracted to, and it's something that that I try and embody as well when I teach. So, and it's also, and they're incredibly approachable, and they walk around, they're like, hey, listen, I don't have all the answers. It's not like I'm this guru, and with Wim, now, because he's so popular, people look at him as like this, like God-like figure, and he's just a dude, and he's cool.
He's chill.
Cool. He's so chill. These guys, they all walk around with that. And that's really, like one of my biggest takeaways from them. Is just have that humility. No, you don't know. He's like, if there's an answer you don't know, then just be like, I'll do my best to go find it out, but not be like, and, let me come up with some bullshit, thing to appease you that doesn't make sense. Yes. And, the other big thing is that they practice what they preach. Like, they are, Casper is a total, biohacking guy. He's all about improving his physiology, and they're all super curious. And, they practice what they preach. They walk the walk, for sure. So that's one of the things, it's like every day you'll find me doing some type of breath work. I'll be in some type of cold, or I'll be doing that. So those are like the big takeaways from those guys.
Nice. Well, you answered the other staple question in that, which is what does it mean to you to practice what you preach?
Yeah.
So we'll give you one more here. What is your biggest coaching pet peeve?
Ooh, that's so interesting. I don't really have one, to be honest with you.
What?
I don't really, because the practice is kind of like people come in the way that they are. So it's just, I try to be like, I definitely try to be like non-judgmental, and just be like, if somebody shows up late, or, I was like, I'm just glad you're here.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
It's like, I hear it, I get it. There's traffic in LA, whatever. Just come in, get your healing on. Like, that's all I care about. So
do you have a pet peeve based on what other coaches may do?
Well, if we're talking about CrossFit, the biggest thing that I can't stand is when coaches work out with you when you're in class.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I've had that happen not at CFLA.
I was going to say, that happens.
Oh, you mean like
they're coaching a class, and then they do the workout with you?
Oh, yeah, that doesn't make any sense.
It's like one of my biggest.
How are they coaching you then?
On,
yeah,
right? Exactly. That stuff does go on.
I don't want it to seem like, we're just CrossFit bashing, because that happens in the yoga studio too, where they just sit up front and do the whole thing. And I'm like, hello, I'm here. Hello. Anyone?
Like, how's my positioning? Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'd say that's
performers.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for your insight and wisdom. And I have taken a copious amount of notes that will be on the website. Where can people find more information about you, hang out with you, and become your best friend?
Awesome. Well, I've got my website is breathwithbreia.com, and that is Breia spelled Breia. My mom put an extra vowel in there for whatever reason. So you can find me there. You can find me at CrossFit Los Angeles. Again, I'm teaching classes throughout the summer on Sundays at 11:15 in the morning. And that's the Pranayama Two-Stage Breath, if you want to come and experience that. I have a Facebook page, All Breath with Breia, and also Instagram. So that is where you can find me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you so much. Seriously, I mean, every time I talk to you and we hang out, I learned so much, and I'm just so grateful that we were able to record this so myself and all our other listeners can continue to learn from you about the masterful and necessary art of breathing.
Oh, thank you guys. I really appreciate you for having me on. And it's great to know you both. So I appreciate it.
To the ice bath we go.
Yeah. I'm going to go do some rounds. Maybe not 2 hours, but
dude, when you're coming down, you've got to you've got to come over.
Oh yeah. I'm excited. Like breath hangouts.
So real quick, let's just talk about that. So if you're in the LA area and you're a Hoffer, or if you're an ice bath enthusiast, there's a group on Facebook called Inner Fire Los Angeles.
Oh, okay.
And we have meetups like once or twice a month, and basically members just host. And people will just come over to their house, and we'll all get together and breathe. We'll all get together and dunk. I happen to have a jacuzzi at my place, and so people can have that hot cold contrast if they want. It's a really fun time when we all get together. Special group. Hoffers are just. Man, special group of people.
I didn't know that was a thing. Hoffers.
I don't know. Maybe it's my term. I have no idea. But
it is now.
But yeah, it's a special breed of people. So
similarly, is it Wim or Vim?
Wim.
It is Wim.
Maybe if it's. That's the. I don't know how you would say it in Dutch.
Okay.
Maybe it's Vim in Dutch. They pronounce their W's kind of like a V, but I don't know.
Okay.
But I just call him Wim.
Okay. Because I remember we had Max Shank on, and he made me think that it was maybe Vim. And so,
maybe.
But you're buddies with him, so if you're calling him Wim and he hasn't corrected you, I think.
Yeah.
All right.
But I'm hanging with Casper today, so I'll ask him, because he's Dutch too, so he would know.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. Until next time, thanks again, everyone. If you are enjoying the show, please, we would love a review. We would love the sharing of it to your friends and family and coaches all over. So we'll catch you next time. Thanks.
Bye. Goodbye.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to Behind the Podium, Unveiling the Coach. If you have enjoyed what you listened to, head over to iTunes and leave us a review. More information on each episode and the podcast in general can be found at behindthepodiumpodcast.com. We'll catch you next time.